Hello, welcome to day 4 of the 7-day outline challenge. You guys are awesome and you're doing great. We've already covered so much, and that's just the preliminary stuff in outlining a novel. Today we take the turn from basic to getting in depth and interesting because today we are talking about developing our characters. Topics for discussion today, we're going to talk about the concept of how to build characters, specifically building them from the outside in, the different types of characters that exist, and then we're going to cover why you need to have strong characters, why strong characters are important in a story. So let's get started. The outside in concept is really this idea of doing it backwards almost. Like you're starting with the minor details of a person. A good analogy would be when you meet a stranger on the street. What's the first thing you notice about them? Usually how they look. Then maybe how they are acting or how they speak. It takes time to understand the developing personality or the personality of a person. It's the same way for our characters. As an author, you're creating something from scratch. Your characters are going to be your babies. I mean, really, your story is your baby, yes, but your characters are really your babies because they are people of your own creation. You are molding them into exactly the people you want them to be, and that is a powerful thing. But even as a writer, you don't exactly know who your characters are. It takes time to understand that, and sometimes our characters even surprise us. So that is why you want to build the character from the outside in, taking into account what they look like, then getting their name down. I mean, honestly, you can probably have the character's name before you have their physical appearance as a writer, but I'm just approaching this from the manner that you might if you met a random person on the street. So you're going to see their looks first, then you're going to get the name and the introduction, find out their age, find out a little bit more about where they're living, and that relates back to yesterday's concept of setting, which, where does your character live? That's probably where the majority of your setting is going to take place. Then you want to get to know their quirks and mannerisms. So specifically, what little things do they do that would irk somebody? What are their little tendencies that would get on somebody's nerves or push somebody's buttons? What are little things that make them weird and special and an individual? What are the things that make them stand apart is really the point of the quirks. And then their mannerisms, how do they behave in public? How do they talk? What vocabulary do they use? These are all things that you want to start collecting first, beginning with the basics of the character. Once you have the basics, that's when you start adding in more depth to the character. getting to know their personality, their strengths and their weaknesses, what their religion is, what their socioeconomic status, their job, their political views, their personal history. Like every one of us as humans are not who we are today from birth. Our experiences and situations in life have shaped who we become. It is the exact same with our characters. They all have a backstory, and you, as the author, need to figure it out. Even if it doesn't come into play in the novel anywhere, you still have to know it because this is your baby. So you start with the basics, and then you add in these layers of depth until you have a tangible, realistic person in front of you. And it's all the written word. But it is somebody your reader will relate to as you write your novel. There's 3 different types of characters. Primary characters are really your main characters. And as a general rule, I say there's about 2 to 3 main characters in this. I have a really great video tutorial on understanding the 3 different character types, and that's going to come to you in a separate email as a special bonus and welcome for joining this challenge and signing up as a member of my community and making it this far. So thank you again for watching this and listening to me rant on about outlining and writing novels and some of the mundane things that come with it. But that video training will go into a lot more depth than what I'm going to go to here. So, starting again, the top of the pyramid of characters, so to speak, is primary characters. Your protagonist, your antagonist, maybe another character of very significant meaning for the story. Then there's your secondary characters. Now, these are characters that aren't as essential to the plot, but the story still does depend on them because they influence your primary characters in some way. And so these are really your supporting characters. And again, a general rule, I say about 3 to 5 of these for a story, especially for beginners just starting out. I mean, you're absolutely free to create as many characters as you want for your story, but creating strong, awesome, fully developed characters is a very difficult and challenging task, I'm not going to lie. And if you have a million of them, you're going to spend way too much time on developing your characters and not on writing your novel. So I stick to this rule of thumb myself, and it's served me so far. Last up, there are minor characters. And these are characters that are non-changing characters, and they don't influence the plot in any way, but they're still important because they add this depth of reality to the novel. I mean, we all encounter people we don't know that we even have acquaintances. And so I think of minor characters as strangers/acquaintances because these aren't people we know very well. They're not people we interact with. They're not people we bring into our inner circle, but we still encounter them and we have contact with them, and they may not directly influence our actions, but it is a part of our day. It's a part of your character's day to meet people like this too. Minor characters are also static characters. So I don't consider this a type of character per se, it's just a classification. And static characters really mean that the characters don't change from at all for the story. They stay exactly the same. Static. Minor characters are almost always static characters. And then the secondary characters can be either static or dynamic characters. Dynamic characters are characters who change, pretty much majorly change throughout the entire story. So they develop and alter as the plot progresses. Primary characters are always going to be dynamic characters because they're always shifting as the plot progresses. And who they are at the start of the novel is not who they're going to be at the end. Those are the types of characters. Now, some tips on how you can go about making really strong characters. Start by making them relatable. Nobody likes a Mary Sue. If you don't know what a Mary Sue is, it's the character that's perfect. She's beautiful. She has a perfect life. She's rich. She can do no wrong, and everything goes smoothly for her. Do you actually know anybody like that in your life? No, me neither. And for the fakers that I might know in my life that pretend everything goes right, they still don't have the perfect life, and they're not really likable people. You don't want your characters to be Mary Sue's. Make them relatable, make them someone your reader wants to get to know, wants to understand, can root for, can hate if it's the antagonist, so on and so forth. You also want each character to be unique. You don't want to have the same people running around throughout the entire novel. They can't all look alike. They can't all say the same things. They can't all believe the same way. That's not going to make a diverse and relatable story. So everybody's different. Make your characters different too. You also are going to want to consider how they interact with others. So you don't just have one character in a novel, you have several. So how are your main characters going to react with each other? How are your secondary characters? How are they going to react to minor characters? Do they interact well with people? Do they not interact well with people? Who do they like? Who do they hate? Who are they friends with? These are all things that you want to start considering as you're building the character, even though these don't really tie into the actual creation of the appearance or the personality. It's important to try and understand this early on so that you can kind of go about creating other characters to fit that. So you start one character at a time. Usually I'm going to say I would start with the protagonist. That's the hero of the story, the good guy, the one that everybody roots for. The one that the plot depends on. So absolutely starting there, you're going to want friends, you're going to want enemies to make the story interesting. So trying to understand how they act in public, how they act in private, how they act in a close circle of friends versus the mask they wear to everybody else. That's going to help you as you move on to character number 2, if that makes any sense at all. So, speaking of building the protagonist first, that is your assignment today. I want you to spend some time really getting to know your protagonist. I mean, I want you to picture them in great detail. And I want you to understand who they are, how they act, how they think, what made them the way they are, what makes them stand out in a crowd. And I want you to be able to have a photograph in front of you of this person, even though you don't have an actual picture to look at. You should be able to picture them clearly in your mind. And it's only one character, so you don't have to worry about everything else. You just start with one character. So build your protagonist. Let's recap what we learned today. We talked about the reasons why we build characters outside in. Mentioned the different types of characters that exist and how we can make them stronger characters as we go about writing them. And then I gave you the assignment. So that is the first step in developing truly awesome characters. The next step isn't so much the development of characters, it's the development of how the characters act in this story. And that is what we're going to cover in day 5. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. Take care.